today. So first, we have H2O, commonly called water. Then we've got O2, or oxygen. We also have CO2, carbon dioxide. And our last main chemical is one called, the formula is C6H12O6, or glucose. Now I do want you to memorize this glucose molecule, the C6H12O6 molecule. Now, that might feel a little bit of intimidating, but remember, it's not very difficult. You just need to remember CHO, or CHO, and then the numbers 6, 12, 6. So if you can remember CHO, 6, 12, 6. So 6 times 2 is 12, divided by half, 6, whatever you got to remember. C6H12O6. We do have some other chemicals, other atoms and molecules that we're going to talk about today. So I'll list those as well, but those are our main four. We also today are going to talk about H+, or hydrogen. Now, you need to remember that this plus right here denotes the charge of the hydrogen, that the hydrogen has a positive electrical charge. That will come in very important. And then the last two, we'll just call these our energy transporters. We have ATP and NADPH. Those are our energy transporters. All those together make up our chemicals we're going to be working with today. So the first thing I said I wanted you to be able to understand is I wanted you to memorize the chemical formula for photosynthesis. And that chemical formula goes like this. First we have 6 H2O, or water molecules. They bond with 6 CO2 molecules. Now, you'll want to remember, these two right here are reactants. Okay, that is very important to remember. Those are reactants. Those two react to form 6O2, or oxygen molecules, and our new big molecule we need to memorize, glucose, C6H12O6. And these two were our reactants, these two are called products. Now I'm going to zoom out, and if you're watching this at home and have not yet written this formula into your notebook, you need to do so. Okay, you need to memorize this formula here. Now, it might feel daunting to memorize a formula, but it's really not very hard. Once we've learned and memorized glucose, and we've memorized the order that the reactants include water and carbon dioxide, and that the products include oxygen and glucose, then all you need to remember is the number ahead of it, and it's the devil's number, right? 666. We've got 6 water plus 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 oxygen. Now, don't look into that very much. It's just a way to remember, right? But 6 water plus 6 carbon dioxide creates 6 oxygen and glucose, C6H12O6. And that's just how things work out, okay? So that's our first thing we wanted to accomplish. It's the first thing we wanted you to learn, so check mark there. The next thing we want you to learn is a basic understanding of the basic understanding of photosynthesis. So to do that, we need to dive into the cell. So we've got here here's our chloroplast in our cell, and in that chloroplast, we're going to have a nice little water molecule. Now, water, if you remember, is H2O. There's our two H's and our O. Okay? Now, this section, I guess I should mention, is what's called the light phase of photosynthesis. The reason this is called the light phase, because this is the phase in which light is used. Okay? During this phase, light comes down and reacts with water. Now, one of the things that makes photosynthesis so amazing is because it takes two very inert or two non-reactive molecules like water and carbon dioxide, and it has them actually react with one another to create a new molecule. Okay? So we've got water, very non-reactive, and the plant has been able to evolve over millions of years to harness that very particular energy signature and wavelength that will destroy these bonds right here in the water. Once those bonds are broken apart, we now have free-floating atoms throughout the cell. The oxygen moves down here, and the hydrogen atoms begin to move over to here. Okay? Now, if you remember, and we refer back to our formula, we need to do this 6 times. Okay? So, let's move back over. That means we have 6 of these water molecules. Okay. Now we've got our oxygens off on their own, and now we've got hydrogen over here. Now, this is happening more than 6 times in a cell. Okay? It's happening many, many, many times over and over in this chlorophyll. And there's beginning to be a huge inflow of hydrogen throughout the entire cell. Now, if we remember, the hydrogen has a positive charge. That's very important because what do 2 positive charges do to each other? They repel or push away from each other. Okay? So these hydrogens are bouncing around all over within the cell, repelling each other. Eventually, they'll become high enough energized that they'll be able to escape through specific channels in the membrane, but as they do so, they lose their energy that they had gotten from the light to our energy carriers, our ATP and NADPH. Okay? Now, at this point, we've finished the light phase of our photosynthesis, and we'll be moving on to what's called the dark phase. It's called the dark phase because it no longer needs light in order to work. So during this dark phase, the ATP and NADPH will begin to react with some carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, 1 carbon, 2 oxygen. That energy, let's do that in black so we can kind of follow that pathway there. That energy begins to react over to here, and it destroys that carbon dioxide. Once again, a very relaxed or inert molecule right there, and breaks it up into its pieces. When those pieces are broken apart, we now have lone atoms moving around, some of them very high energy. These oxygens come over and bond with the oxygens from over here to form O2, an oxygen molecule. Oxygen as a molecule is 2 oxygen atoms bonded together like that in a double bond. Now this is happening 6 times. We've got 6 carbon dioxide atoms needed to form this reaction. And over here we end up with 6 oxygen molecules. Okay, there's carbon dioxide molecules, excuse me, I misspoke there. Okay, so now we've got all this carbon, high energy from the ATP and NADPH that are all going to form together to make a carbon ring. Almost looks like a diamond here. Okay. This carbon ring now has lots of energy, very reactive, and it wants to react with some of the other lone unbound atoms in this soup here in the cell. Well, we've got some unbound oxygen right there, so those oxygens move down and they begin to bond to the carbons. Once those oxygens are all bonded, the carbon ring is still not quite stable, and then there's some other atoms that are going to bond with it to help it stabilize. Those hydrogen atoms from over here in our hydrogen region, part of the light cycle, will come over and begin to bond. some of them to the oxygen, some to the carbon. Last one. Okay, they all bond together. Then, once all these have been bonded together, we've got one big molecule. Okay, this molecule, we're going to copy it, bring it over here, where we can look at it more closely. We'll change its color to symbolize that it's all one molecule now. Okay, so it's all been changed to this gray molecule that we call glucose. Now, one of the things that's really, really neat is if we look at our formula and how much of our reactants and products and that we have, we can actually trace all of these atoms and show that none of the atoms at any point were lost. So if we start over here with the oxygen, we see, or with the water, we see there's 6 oxygen atoms. Those atoms come down here and we end up with 6 lone oxygen atoms. Okay? Now, we also have 6 molecules of water that each have 2 hydrogen atoms. 6 times 2 ends up being 12. So you end up having 12 hydrogen atoms moved into this soup. Okay? Then our other reactant, carbon dioxide, 6 carbons, and then there's 2 oxygens in that atom. 6 times 2, again 1, 2, ends up being 12 oxygens from those atoms. So if we look, 6 of those oxygens move all the way over and bond with these 6 oxygens here to form 6 oxygen molecules. Now there's 2 oxygen molecules and 2 oxygen atoms and 1 oxygen molecule, making 12 oxygen molecule or 12 oxygen atoms, all accounted for in that case. Okay. Then we had 6 carbon atoms. If we come down to our ring here, we end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 carbon atoms. And if we look, we've got 6 lone oxygens still left over. So if we count those, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 carbon atoms left over, or oxygen atoms left over as well. Then finally we had our 12 hydrogen, which I know I didn't draw 12 there, but you get the idea. If we go over and count, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hydrogens. They are all accounted for. Okay? Every last atom in that reaction are accounted for. So, based off of this here, we'll hopefully have our basic understanding of what happens in the process of photosynthesis. Now, I want to emphasize this is basic. Okay, I did simplify this quite a bit. There's a lot more detail that goes into this. Okay, but we don't need to know that at our level. You'll learn it later on in school. The last thing I wanted you to be able to do is follow the energy pathways. So if we look and we start at the very beginning, we first are getting energy from the sun, and this would be electromagnetic radiation, okay, or commonly called light energy. Okay, that light energy is used to break apart the bonds in the water and is transferred partially to the hydrogen, which then are moving around, or a motion energy, sometimes called mechanical energy, there within the hydrogen. The mechanical energy of the hydrogen is later transported to our transport molecules as chemical energy, but those transport molecules are very short-lived. They can't hold on to that energy for very long, so they transfer it to the carbon dioxide, where it destroys the carbon dioxide and then begins to rebuild. And as it rebuilds, that energy finally is stored as chemical energy within our glucose. Okay, chemical energy there in the glucose. Okay, and there is where things really become so amazing. Okay, photosynthesis is just this amazing process where water and carbon dioxide are broken down into this huge storage of energy in glucose.